In 2084, science pushes the boundaries of mortality, offering a glimmer of hope to those facing their final moments. Our protagonist, a terminally ill man, takes a bold leap into the unknown. As he awakens years later, he faces a world utterly changed. The cost of his second chance becomes stark as he grapples with the profound implications of defying death. Hello, welcome back to I Am Movies. Today, we're diving into the 2016 sci-fi movie known as Realive. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get right into it. In the year 2084, on a remote mountainside, a research center comes into view. It's the first facility where a resurrection will take place. Inside, we meet Elizabeth, a nurse embarking on her first day at the Regenerative Research Center. Her anticipation grows as she is about to meet the lead doctor. It lets us know just how excited Elizabeth is to meet this doctor. Dr. Gether, one of the doctors, introduces Elizabeth to the enigmatic Dr. West, a key figure in the Regenerative Research Center. Dr. West extends his hand, offering a warm welcome to the newcomer. With curiosity in her eyes, Elizabeth shakes his hand and listens intently. Her mind begins to whirl with the implications of Dr. West's words, setting the stage for a captivating journey into the world of scientific innovation, ambition, and the quest for immortality. Following their initial meeting, we are introduced to Dr. Sarah, another doctor in the facility. Dr. Sarah mentions that Elizabeth will not only be a nurse, but also a partner of Lazarus, the first ever patient to get resurrected. After that, the three doctors and Elizabeth embark on a tour of the vast Prodigy Health Corporation Center. Dr. West leads Elizabeth into the heart of their operation, explaining that the entire wing of the building is dedicated to their ambitious project. Dr. Gether adds that there are a whopping 200,000 square feet of facilities for Lazarus alone, emphasizing the colossal scale of their endeavor. When Elizabeth inquires about how long they've been working on this project, Dr. West reveals they've dedicated 4 years to preparing for the momentous task of reanimation. A scanned map of Lazarus appears on a screen, depicting the shapes of 3 human bodies. Dr. West explains that they use these scans to study the primary challenges and make crucial decisions, such as what parts of the body can be reanimated and what requires replacement with bionic components and organs developed in their laboratory. Dr. Gether then showcases the operating room, where surgeons and technicians diligently work. He reveals that multiple surgeons will operate under Dr. West's guidance, assisted by 120 technicians. They even display a model of a surgical robot designed for the procedure. Curious about the timing of the surgery, Elizabeth asks, "When's the surgery?" Dr. West responds, "July 25th. That gives Elizabeth 4 weeks to familiarize with the clinical details and to prepare her strategy. Dr. Sarah explains that after the surgery, Lazarus will remain in an induced coma for nearly 2 months to allow his body to adapt to the new organs and implants. This period also helps identify and address any potential reanimation defects. She mentions that part of Elizabeth's role during this time is to assist Lazarus in transitioning into his new life, and that she will become much more than just his nurse. She will be his partner. Elizabeth enthusiastically agrees, saying, "Of course," as they prepare to leave. Dr. West asks if Elizabeth has any questions. She gazes at the images of Lazarus's muscles on the screen and finally asks, "What's Lazarus's name?" The scene shifts to the past when a child named Mark playing carefreely, and it ponders why time seems to pass so slowly when we're children. Mark joins his parents, and the three share a moment of love and connection. The scene shifts when Mark playing with some other children. In a poignant moment, the children cut off the tail of a lizard and then kill it with a pretend sword, highlighting the innocence and cruelty of childhood. As the movie unfolds, we see a young adult named Mark driving down the road in his car. An envelope with the name Memorial Hospital catches his eye on the seat. Meanwhile, a doctor is examining brain x-rays from 2015, and he delivers the shocking news to Mark. The doctor informs Mark that he has cancer in its advanced stages, and he only has 1 year left to live. The devastating news leaves Mark in a state of profound shock. We transition to an office setting where it becomes apparent that Mark is preparing for the inevitable. He hands over his business responsibilities to a capable successor, informing his clients that someone else will take his place. Mark dedicates his time to finishing all pending projects and informs his mother that he only has 1 year left. As he starts selling his belongings and making his will, Mark's sadness is palpable. He vents his frustration by angrily throwing away his books. The weight of his impending mortality is taking a toll. One night, his girlfriend Naomi goes in search of him and finds him. She steps out of her car and embraces him, and Mark admits to feeling lost. The next day, Naomi sits in her car crying, fully aware that Mark may have just 1 year to live. Naomi eventually goes inside Mark's house, where they meet and lie on the bed together. She shares that she met Steve, her ex, who wants to rekindle their relationship, but she reassures Mark of her enduring love for him. Mark, overwhelmed by his situation, suggests that Naomi should be with Steve. However, she insists on spending the remaining time of Mark's life with him. Their love and devotion shine through as they face an uncertain future together. In a touching evening with his friends, Mark stands up during dinner and goes inside the house. He returns with a newspaper article from 7 years ago, discussing cryonisation and how scientists managed to bring a heart back to life. Mark reveals his plan to undergo cryonisation after his death, giving his body to science so that he may potentially be revived in the future. His friends are delighted by this hopeful prospect, and they raise their glasses in a toast, believing that he will grow old, even though Mark insists otherwise. After that, Mark's friend Charles expresses doubts about the guarantees and costs of cryonisation. Naomi, who is unhappy with Mark's decision, urges him to continue conventional medical treatment. Mark, however, shares a painful memory of his father's unsuccessful battle with cancer and expresses his fear of suffering a similar fate. One of his friends suggests a different approach. Mark could take his own life, allowing doctors to legally put his body in cryostasis after his death. In a future scene, Dr. West, Dr. Sarah, and Dr. Gether continue their work at the Prodigy Health Corporation Center, diligently pursuing their body-enhancing project. They focus on a robotic arm fine-tuning a muscular body, and their efforts seem to be progressing well. The narrative takes us back to a scene of a young Mark jumping into the sea, symbolic of his zest for life. In the future, Dr. West and his team successfully bring Lazarus back to life. The process involves opening his eyes, and it's revealed that Lazarus is, in fact, Mark. Through regenerating his cells and transferring him into a new body, they've resurrected him. A life-sustaining cord-like tube is attached to Mark's abdomen, providing him with essential nutrients. If this tube were to detach from his body, he would have only a few hours to survive. In the next scene, Dr. West and Elizabeth place Mark in a room to rest. The following morning, Mark, while pressing a ball with his finger, humorously asks the doctors if they are now living on Mars. This lighthearted moment elicits laughter from everyone present. Dr. Gether arrives and presents Mark with a mind writer, or MW, a device that records memories from the past and reminds them what they missed out. With Dr. West's assistance, Mark briefly uses the MW, retrieving a few memories from his past in just a second. Dr. Sarah then departs from the room. Mark decides to use the MW again, this time gaining access to a flood of memories from his childhood to the present. The flashbacks include cherished moments, and he relives memories of Naomi. The device allows him to reconnect with his past profoundly. Later, we see Elizabeth tending to Mark's body, and they engage in a friendly conversation. When Mark mentions that Elizabeth is pretty, she thanks Mark and tells him that it is easier for them now to choose their children's features, and microsurgery does the rest. When Mark asks if she has a boyfriend, she mentions that it is different now since they don't suppress much love anymore, and she only meets with her sex group if there's free time. Mark is surprised and jokingly says it's the world he dreamed of. Elizabeth, liking the attitude of Mark, surprises him by suggesting they could have sex later once Mark is okay, leaving Mark in shock. At night, Mark attempts to walk on his own, removes his cord, but quickly realizes he's too weak. He gazes at himself in the mirror and an old man appears from it. Overwhelmed by his condition, he collapses. Mark's weakened state leads to a moment where he crawls on the ground and Elizabeth arrives to assist him, unknowingly becoming a lifeline to his memories. The next day, the doctors analyze Mark's brain, with Dr. Sarah reassuring him that memory loss isn't a significant concern. Mark has a one-on-one conversation with Dr. West, expressing his gratitude for the transformative experience. Dr. West provides further explanation and guidance. In the subsequent days, Mark is seen cycling, and Elizabeth surprises him by closing his eyes. Dr. West and his team join the celebration, bringing a cake to commemorate Mark's progress. His 100 days of recovery have passed, and he can now walk on his own. Dr. West presents Mark with an old box filled with his belongings, allowing Mark to relive his cherished memories. Among the items is a letter from Naomi, adding a poignant touch to this journey of rediscovery and transformation. As Mark continues to regain his old memories, he recollects the beautiful moments he shared with Naomi, starting from their college days to the time leading up to his cryonisation. One night, Mark hands Elizabeth the letter written by Naomi and asks her to read it. In the letter, Naomi expresses her deep love for Mark and her hope to see him again, which deeply touches Mark's heart. The flashbacks to his memories with Naomi continue, including moments of joy, kisses, and their playful times by the sea. However, a stark image of an older Naomi in the water appears, hinting at her deteriorating health in Mark's absence. Naomi's condition took a turn for the worse in the years without Mark, leading her to decide to undergo cryonisation in her 50s with the hope of reuniting with him. Mark is profoundly saddened by the realization of his past actions and his separation from Naomi. The following day, the doctors showed Mark the capsule where they placed him and other patients, including Naomi. He pleads with the doctors to revive Naomi, as they did for him, but they explain that her body had weakened significantly during her time in cryostasis. Reviving her is beyond their technological capabilities. Mark, burdened by guilt and grief, places blame on himself for Naomi's situation. Mark then asked Elizabeth to shave his head as he had before when he first woke up. After a few days, we see Mark and his emotional state worsens, and the doctors closely observe his changing behavior, discussing the situation amongst themselves. Elizabeth suggests allowing Mark to leave the research center, hoping that time and new experiences might help him move on from his memories of Naomi. The doctors, however, decide to give Mark some time to process his feelings. Elizabeth, who has grown close to Mark during his stay, continues to provide him with care and support. She enters Mark's room, adjusts the lighting, administers medication, and then they share some intimate moments. One day, after receiving a call from a technician, Mark takes the opportunity to steal the key to Dr. West's room, as Dr. West has left. Inside the room, he discovers West's mind writer chip. When he activates the MW device, he gains access to Dr. West's old memories and learns about the experiments conducted on various people. Many of these experiments had failed, resulting in the revival of individuals with weakened bodies who eventually succumbed to death. However, the experiment on Mark was a success, and he remained unharmed. In the next scene, we see Dr. West sharing the story of Mark's successful revival in a public program. Mark meets people, affirming his existence, and sits down. Elizabeth appears and places her hand on his shoulder. After some time, Mark quietly departs without saying a word to anyone. Dr. West comes to meet him, and Mark confronts him, holding him responsible for the deaths of those on whom the experiments had been conducted. Dr. West confesses to his mistakes, and in a moment of anger, Mark confronts him, but then he calms down and goes to sleep on his bed. The narrative transitions to a past moment where Mark is hosting a party. When the doorbell rings, he opens it to find Naomi standing there. They embrace each other, and Mark expresses his happiness. Naomi reassures him that she is with him, and they share a dance at the party. Back in the present, Mark returns to the cryostasis chamber where Naomi is stored, and Elizabeth joins him. Mark shares his old memories, describing how he ended his life before undergoing cryostasis. He reflects on the unique nature of his current life, and asks for Elizabeth's help in ending his pain. Elizabeth questions why she should assist him, and Mark responds that she loves him. Upon hearing his words, Elizabeth leaves the scene in tears. We see the outlines of the plan, which is straightforward. Over the next few days, Mark will follow the advice of his doctors and record his memories for the last time. In the following scene, Elizabeth arrives and embraces Mark. She whispers the name of the medication into his ear, which will allow him to have a peaceful death. Mark proceeds to the Research Institute's laboratory, searching for the medication mentioned by Elizabeth. As he locates the bottle, he recalls the painful memory of taking poison in front of Naomi and the subsequent flashbacks of his life, including the moment he ended his life by ingesting the poison. With the bottle in his hand, Mark returns to the cryostasis chamber, where Naomi rests. He takes the poisonous medication, bringing to mind all his cherished memories. In a final act, he disconnects the cryostasis chamber to prevent Naomi from becoming a part of the same futile experiments that affected him. Mark sits there, waiting for the impending end, as the past and present collide in his mind. The movie concludes with all the doctors standing before Mark as he opens his eyes. Dr. West reminds him that he didn't lose his life to cancer. Rather, he took his own life with poison for a second chance at living. The movie ends with a question: will Mark suffer the same fate as before? Or will he accept that he will no longer die as his memories are already recorded? This movie teaches us how we accept the choices we make when we are alive. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.